people, and welcome to the show. Tonight is Monday. It is the last Monday of Donald Trump's presidency, and I could not be more delighted. We have a lot to talk about, a lot to cover, but first of all, I want to make sure that you are telling your friends and family, all of your connections, your posse, your crew, your book club, your frat, your church, and anybody else that you know about the show. Get them to join our Patreon community, to share it and like it, and to subscribe on YouTube and anywhere else you can find this show. We're trying to expand the voice of progressive leadership, and I'm super excited to be a part of that. The second thing I'd like to remind you is that this Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, we are having a national town hall on how to fix Florida. If we can win Georgia, we can win Florida. And I want to help people understand what is going on here that makes it such a tough nut to crack, and how can we circumvent another, close but no cigar outcome in 2022. So if you're interested in Florida and what can be done, and what are we doing right, and what are we doing wrong, and what can we do differently, we're going to have a really interesting national conversation about it Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, in a live town hall. And stay tuned for the flyer and details about that, but it is on my Pam Keith FL handles, and I am looking forward to having you all chime in on that conversation. We can win Florida, and I'm gonna lay out how we do that. So check that out. Anyway, so let's talk about what's going on today. Topic number one today is about the conversations we've been, the things that we have been learning and seeing about how this Capitol insurrection fest occurred and who's responsible for it. Obviously, there were ringleaders. We're learning that Donald Trump obviously was way more prescriptive in getting people to do that than initially thought. His campaign staff were organizers of the rallies that took place right before the insurrection. But we also learned over the last few days how many members of Congress and other people in law enforcement and others that were involved to some extent or another. It was deeper, more dangerous, more thoughtful, more planned than we thought. It wasn't just the rallies that were planned. The infiltration of the Capitol was also planned. And we're learning more and more about that. But I want to talk a little bit more about how you go from this space of I'm really angry and I want you to listen to me, to this I'm really angry and violence is my only only result, or the only thing that I can turn to get what I want. And we call that process, quote unquote, radicalization. Now, this is not the first context in which radicalization has arisen. If y'all remember the post 9/11 era, there was a great deal of discussion in not just in the United States, but globally about the jihadist movement, right? Which was a offshoot of radicalization of an already very conservative component of Islam. So Islam is like Christianity, right? It's 50,000, 70, 12 different imams. It's all these different schools of thought. It's got all these denominations, or sects as we call them in Islam. And it's also broken down, like we have Catholic and Protestant, it's broken down into Sunni and Shia, and all kinds of permutations from there. There is no one cohesive person who speaks on behalf of Islam, period, right? And because of that, it's easy for, just like Christianity, it's easy for charismatic leaders to develop followings, and to be able to move people around religious teachings or religious philosophies. But almost always there's a political or financial component to the sectionalization of any religion, including Islam. Right. So when it's factionalized like that, there's almost always either a money component or a power component that's baked into it. It's not purely philosophical. And that is very much the truth with the Al-Qaeda extremist movement that developed out of the Wahhabist tradition of Islam that you find in Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia does have a tiny component of Shia Islam. It's almost entirely Sunni, and it is considered one of the most conservative countries in terms of the demand that everybody in the country live in accordance with very strict religious rules. But that being said, there's still even a component within a conservative Islamic environment that's even way more, right? Because it goes from all Muslims have to behave like this to the whole world has to behave like this. That's when they start to go from this is what we believe to, and everybody who doesn't believe it is an infidel, or, and that, and now a threat to what we believe, right? And that is the component that you start to see when you start to see radicalization. It's not just that I'm right, but that I cannot tolerate those who are wrong. Those who do not share those who are wrong are a threat. Those who are wrong have to be contained. Those who are wrong are apostate, and demonizing, right? So it's not just that you're wrong, it's that you're evil. It is your evilness that makes you wrong, right? And that process was a process that we saw spread throughout the Middle East and elsewhere. I mean, it wasn't only the Middle East, mind you. I mean, there's South Asia, and there was also all over Europe and all over the United States. There were plenty of what we call sleeper cells. Sleeper cells were these components of people who got together, who found common cause for agreeing with a particularly virulent and strident position. And what became difficult after 9/11 was the dispersed model of radicalization, right? That online and, various types of platforms of, like the dark web and all these other places where people would find themselves able to organize and radicalize, right? And proselytize to the disaffected and the angry and the hurt and the left out, or just the bored, right? And that there started to become these networks to finance these things through these dark finance, channels. Some of it was, money laundering. Some of it was oil smuggling and gun smuggling and human trafficking and stuff like that. And then some of it started to become part of the more sophisticated and much harder to understand world of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and all the stuff that is like really way beyond and way more confusing to the non-techie person who can understand all of that. But the reason Bitcoin has always been a really weird thing for a lot of people is that it is huge transactions of money that are not taxed or tracked. Now, theoretically, there's some way to track Bitcoin, but what is it? 1-800-BITCOIN is us? Like, I don't know what that is, right? And so if you don't have regulation around Bitcoin, and it was created to avoid regulation and transact internationally without regulation, then it ought not surprise you that the world's terrorists decided this was for them, right? And the world's mobsters decided it was for them. And certainly really ugly actors like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un and others are using cryptocurrency to buy influence and agitate around the world. This should not shock you. But that is the reality that came out of 9/11 and our understanding that came out of that and our reaction to that, which is what I'm getting to now. Our reaction to 9/11 was not cute. We were not nice about it. This whole Patriot Act thing came out of 9/11, which allowed our government to monitor even U.S. citizens and go into their emails and read what they're talking about, because they said, this threat is so severe, we got to cut it off at the pass, right? When there was somebody out there, an imam or somebody who was proselytizing, death to America, they would find themselves shut down and their ability to influence people stopped. Right? Not because, and while they were screeching about their civil rights and their, free speech or whatever, we just said, hey, you're too much of a threat. Ergo, we're shutting you down. We don't need to wait for you to bomb us to shut you down because you're a threat to the United States. And it became a national security issue. And so what I want to tell you that you need to understand right now is that we have a body of law that's about national security, and we have a body of law that's about First Amendment free speech. And those two bodies of law didn't really cross each other when we were dealing with parties and entities working outside of the United States, right? And we weren't all that concerned about how those two bodies of law cross each other when we're dealing with Muslims within the United States, right? We weren't all that, we're like, well, whatever, you're all foreigners, right? But now we're dealing with a whole other animal, right? Because now we're dealing with white nationalists who are doing precisely the same thing that Al-Qaeda did, right? They're using the exact same tactics as Al-Qaeda. It's online radicalization. It is constant demonization of the other. It is sleeper cells that are getting set up all over the country. And every time they get caught, they move on to another platform and they move on to another platform. But this time they have the backup of OANN, One America Network, which was set up by Trumpers to protect Trump and to incite and demonize all the people who are against Trump, right? And you have Newsmax and Parler and all these other QAnon, right? All these things. Those are technically, they fit the absolute 100% black letter definition of online radicalization. That is what they are doing. They are convincing people that since they can't get their way lawfully, then they have to use by whatever means necessary. They have to use violence to get what they want. That is precisely what the jihadists said too. If you can't get the infidels to do what you want through prayer and peaceful means, then jihad is what's called for. So what you saw last, back in the insurrection fest was white supremacist jihad. That's what it was. And so we need to change the language that we use to talk about it so that we understand the level of threat that it is and what bucket of law it belongs in. When you start to bring pipe bombs into the Capitol, we are not talking about First Amendment rights anymore. We're talking about national security law. And so I don't really give a damn about your First Amendment rights. And yes, I said it, and yes, I meant it. I stopped caring about your First Amendment rights when you stopped caring about the rights of people to stay alive in the Capitol. That's when the line is. And in our law, the line is very black and white. It's very black and white. The law countenances every criticism of the government you can come up with. I don't like Trump. I don't like Biden. I don't like this, that, and the other thing. They all suck. They're all terrible. They're horrible. I think they're terrible. I want to vote them out. That is all protected First Amendment. But when you say, and so, therefore, we must storm the Capitol, that's no longer First Amendment. That now is seditious. That is now a crime. You don't get to do that. So I want people to start nationally talking about what has happened to the United States in the same language and term and framing that we talked about what happened with Al-Qaeda, because it is precisely the same thing, right? An extraordinary, extreme sense of grievance, right? Predicated on the demonization of the other that can only be resolved through bloody conflict. That is radicalization, and that is what online radicalization is, and that is what OAN is, that is what Parler is, that is what QAnon is. That's what it is. Let's treat it that way. If you like what you just heard, you can find out so much more and hear so much more on my Patreon channel, patreon.com/Pam Keith FL. That's where you hear the rest of this discussion, and there's lots more to share.